Okay. Can we all agree on one thing before we start? Human beings are strange. We'll ignore our gut, ignore our body, ignore obvious red flags, ignore our own needs. And then 6 months later, we're sitting on the kitchen floor eating shredded cheese straight out of the bag, wondering, how did my life get here? Respectfully, you probably got about 73 notifications before everything, quote unquote, fell apart. I'm Caroline, and welcome back to Respectfully, You're the Problem, the podcast where we have uncomfortable conversations that make us healthier without taking ourselves so seriously we forget to laugh, because healing is hard enough and therapy is expensive. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, the best way to support it is by following the show, leave a quick 5-star rating, and share your favorite episode with someone who might need to hear it. It really does help more than you know. So let's get into it. Something I've been thinking about lately, life is actually really polite. It almost never starts by screaming at you. It whispers. Your body whispers. Your intuition whispers. Your relationships whisper. Even your own thoughts whisper. Little moments that make you stop for half a second and think, that felt weird. Something doesn't feel right here. And then, because we're incredibly talented and mostly avoidant of our feelings, we explain it away. Maybe you've been exhausted for months, but you tell yourself, it's just a busy time. Maybe you've been anxious every Sunday night before work and you convince yourself everybody hates Mondays. Maybe you've been snapping at everyone you love and you blame it on being tired. Maybe your relationship doesn't feel as safe or connected or as easy, but you keep saying, we're just going through a rough patch." Those are whispers. And whispers are easy to ignore because whispers don't demand your attention. They simply invite it. And respectfully, most of us decline that invitation. You know those little iPhone notifications? Storage full. And you're like, not today. Then storage critically full. Remind me tomorrow. And eventually, your phone just gives up trying to be nice. Now, half of your apps won't open. You can't take pictures. You're deleting 10 screenshots from Instagram with the post titled 10 things to do if you want him to chase you. And don't even get me started on that topic. We're going to pin that one for later. I've got a whole episode lined up to address that emotional dumpster fire. No. Somehow, we're shocked when everything falls apart almost at once. Respectfully, your phone warned you, and honestly, so did your life. So before we drag our dating lives through this swamp, I think we need to talk about your body. Because whether you realize it or not, your body has been trying to have a conversation with you for a really long time. The problem is, most of us are terrible listeners and incredibly stubborn. My body can literally be standing in the corner, waving both arms, like one of those runway workers trying to direct a plane. And I'm over here like, I'm probably just dehydrated. No, Caroline, you've been clenching your jaw constantly and you haven't had a full night's sleep in almost 2 months. That's not dehydration. I honestly think your body is the most honest friend you'll ever have because it's not dramatic. but because it refuses to lie to you. Your mind can rationalize almost anything. Your body can't. It starts off nice. Hey, you're carrying a lot right now. You ignore it. Hey, you're clenching your jaw every single day. We ignore it. Hey, your stomach hurts every morning before work. Nope, didn't hear that. Hey, you haven't slept through the night in weeks. Not today, Satan. Eventually, your body's like, okay. Apparently, whispering isn't working. So then one day, you're crying because someone in the grocery store parking lot cut you off and took the parking spot you wanted. And you're sitting in your car thinking, I don't even know why I'm crying. Meanwhile, your nervous system is in the backseat like, really? You have absolutely no idea. Okay. And here's the rude part. Your body doesn't speak English. It doesn't send polite emails. It doesn't text you. It doesn't schedule a calendar invite that says, hi, just checking in, seeing if you'd like to unpack all that unresolved baggage sometime maybe around 3:30. Wouldn't that be amazing? No. Your body speaks in headaches, muscle tension, brain fog, digestive issues, anxiety, exhaustion, irritability, or my personal favorite, walking into a room and immediately thinking, oh my gosh, I do not want to be here. Nothing happened. Nobody looked at you funny. Nobody insulted your outfit. Your body is simply saying, I've had enough. And we call that being in a mood, being moody. I swear, human beings deserve Olympic gold medals for explaining away our own discomfort. We're incredible at it. I'm just tired. It's just stress. I'm sure it's just hormones. It's just a busy season. I'm probably overthinking it. Maybe. But can I ask you something? How many times has I'm just stressed actually meant I know something isn't right, but dealing with it sounds wildly inconvenient? Thank you, but no thank you. Next, please. And here's what I've realized: the whispers usually aren't confusing, they're just inconvenient. Because the second I admit something feels off, now I have to decide what I'm going to do about it. And decisions are uncomfortable. So instead, we explain, we justify, we minimize, we ask our friends, we Google it, we watch 17 TikToks, or my personal favorite, we ask ChatGPT. Basically, we ask everybody except ourselves. Because deep down, we already know. And nowhere do we ignore whispers better than in relationships. Because relationships almost never fall apart in one gigantic, dramatic moment. They leak first. Trust doesn't disappear overnight. Resentment doesn't magically show up one Tuesday morning. People don't wake up and suddenly feel disconnected. It starts much smaller than that. A comment that didn't sit right, a need that never got communicated, a boundary that got crossed and laughed off. One person starts whispering, the other person doesn't hear it. So they whisper again, a little louder. Eventually, somebody starts screaming. And here's the part that completely changed the way that I look at my own relationships. Sometimes The person ignoring the whispers wasn't just my partner. Sometimes it was me. So let's talk about why relationships rarely explode overnight and why the smallest whispers are usually the ones that matter the most. Because respectfully, this is where otherwise intelligent adults completely lose access to common sense and critical thinking. I mean, seriously, you can have a master's degree, run a business, own a home, successfully assemble IKEA furniture without crying, which honestly deserves an award in itself, and then catch feelings for one emotionally unavailable person. And suddenly you're out here saying things like, they're just busy. They're just really bad at texting. They've never been loved correctly. Bestie, they've ignored you for 3 days. I've never seen smarter people become more creative than when they're defending someone they're dating. And I will be the first to stand on business in these Chanel shoes and tell you I was the queen of this. I could proactively make myself colorblind to the red flags and twist the truth until it looked prettier than a prom queen. Just to myself, though. My friends, my friends saw right through it. I wasn't fooling anyone, but bless their hearts for loving me through the horrific incidents of terror that I brought in front of them. But we all do this. We become defense attorneys. Well, their last relationship really hurt them. Their job has been really stressful. They're just under a lot of pressure. They're not good at expressing their emotions. Meanwhile, your friends are sitting there thinking, if this was my relationship, you would have told me to leave 6 months ago. But isn't this amazing how much grace we give someone once we've imagined a future with them? Now, every red flag has an explanation. Every disappointment has an excuse. And every gut feeling becomes, maybe I'm just overthinking. You know what people always say after they break up? I just don't know what happened. Really? No idea. None. Because I promise you, the breakup wasn't the first thing that happened. It was just the loudest thing. Relationships don't usually explode, they leak little by little. One conversation that never gets finished, one apology that never comes, one boundary that keeps getting crossed, one need that gets dismissed, one disappointment, then another, then another. It's kind of like a tiny leak under your kitchen sink. At first, it's just one little drip, no big deal. Then one day, your entire cabinet falls through the floor and everybody acts surprised. The floor didn't suddenly give out, it rotted, one drop at a time. And here's where I think social media has us completely fooled. Everybody talks about red flags. Red flags, red flag, red flag. Some dude, some dude even became famous for being the red flag guy. Although I will say what he posts are actually red flags. But you see my point. I think most relationships don't end because somebody ignored one giant red flag. And honestly, I think some potential really great relationships end too soon because we started calling every uncomfortable moment a red flag. Somebody takes a little longer to text back, red flag. They need some alone time after work, emotionally unavailable. They communicate differently than you. Attachment issues. They set a boundary. Narcissist. Some of y'all have diagnosed more narcissists from your couch than a licensed psychologist has in their entire career. I was actually, personal story, I was actually talking to this guy uh, once, briefly, and we had been talking maybe 3 to 4 weeks at this point. My phone at the time was doing this weird thing where it would tell people inside the text thread, Caroline has her notifications silenced. If you have an iPhone, you probably know what I'm talking about. This is what shows in the text thread when somebody puts their phone on do not disturb. So, unbeknownst to me, my phone randomly put me in D&D. It would do this all the time. And this motherfucker, right off the bat, sees that and comes in hot and says, notifications silenced, red flag, like all in caps, and then proceeded to persecute me like I was on trial. First of all, buckaroo, even if I did have my phone on D&D, that means I am busy. So respectfully, go fuck yourself. If you cannot handle me not being at your service when you want me. Second, the magnitude of that overreaction was completely uncalled for and purely rooted in a wounded trauma response to something that had happened to him in a previous relationship and had nothing to do with me. And here's a hard pill to swallow. Before you go jumping to conclusions like you're the star ballerina in Swan Lake, take a beat. Or as the kids say, pause. Take a breath and think, why am I having such a visceral reaction to this? Before you go and pop off and make yourself look like a complete ass. Your initial response and emotions to a stimulus or trigger is not always the truth. One of my best friends, Casey Kohler, is a mom, a wife, an entrepreneur, and a published author. And she always says, you can feel the way you want to feel, and that's valid, but you do not get to act however you want to act. She teaches her children this. Give this woman Mom of the Year because she is out here doing God's work. And she's right. Your feelings are not dismissed. They're valid because they were real at some point. They just may not be real and appropriate to the right now. Your brain is designed to protect you. If you experience something that really hurt you and you had a big emotional reaction, then your brain remembers and attempts to protect you should that thing ever happen again. So it remembers. Unfortunately, you have to be in charge of telling your brain, this is not the same situation. This is not the same person. And your feelings are not always the truth or fact of what is actually happening now. And I want to say something. There absolutely are real red flags. Manipulation, controlling behavior, abuse, chronic dishonesty, disrespect. Those are serious and they deserve to be taken seriously. And we'll cover how to recognize those in another episode. But we've gotten to the point where we're labeling ordinary human imperfections as deal breakers before we even give someone the chance to be known. Not every disagreement is incompatibility. Not every misunderstanding is emotional abuse. Not every uncomfortable conversation is a sign you should leave. Sometimes it's just two imperfect people learning how to love each other. Healthy relationships don't exist because two perfect people found each other. They exist because two emotionally mature people stay curious long enough to understand each other instead of assuming the worst. And here's where I think we get ourselves into trouble. We're so busy scanning other people for red flags that we forget to ask the much more uncomfortable question. What if the biggest red flag in the relationship isn't theirs? What if it's the story you've been telling yourself about them without even giving them the opportunity to clarify? Did that hit home for someone? I know I felt that. A whisper says, "Hmm, that felt off. I should ask about that." A wounded version of us says, "I've seen this before and I already know how it ends." Those are not the same thing. One is curiosity, the other is self protection. And if we can't tell the difference, we'll spend our lives walking away from people who may have been a really great match for us while staying with people who never were. So we need to get away from beating the red flag to death. Nobody talks about beige flags because beige flags are boring. They're subtle. They're easy to explain away. They're things like you don't really feel hurt anymore. You notice you start apologizing a lot. You stop bringing things up because you're tired of having the same conversation that turns into an argument. You start rehearsing before you're going to say something because you're trying to avoid their reaction. You edit your personality just to keep the peace. And one day you realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. Not because someone forced you to change, but because little by little, you kept making yourself smaller. And can we talk about how low the bar gets sometimes? Someone will say, well, they've never cheated. Okay. That wasn't the question. Well, they came home eventually. Again, that wasn't the question. The question isn't, could it be worse? The question is this healthy? Those are two completely different standards. Because if your relationship goals are simply, well, they don't commit any felonies, we might need to recalibrate. The bar isn't just low, it's underground. And before we spend the next 10 minutes blaming our ex, can I lovingly make everyone uncomfortable? Your partner whispers too, asking for flowers. Maybe they were asking to feel appreciated. Maybe they weren't asking for another date night. Maybe they were asking to feel chosen. And because they weren't screaming, you assumed everything was fine. The absence of conflict does not automatically mean the presence of peace. Sometimes it just means somebody got tired of repeating themselves. Changed my life. What if the whisper wasn't they're emotionally unavailable? What if the whisper was, why do I keep choosing emotionally unavailable people? Ouch. What if the whisper wasn't, nobody communicates anymore? What if it was, I keep expecting them to read my mind instead of communicating? Double ouch. And that's the dangerous part about whispers. You think you're ignoring one little thing, but whispers don't disappear, they accumulate. Your body keeps the score, your nervous system keeps receipts. The call is coming from inside the house. Eventually, the weight of everything you've postponed becomes heavier than the thing you're trying to hold on to. So, if relationships don't usually end because of one giant moment, and if resentment really is just ignored whispers stacking up over time, then the real question becomes, why do we keep ignoring ourselves in the first place? I don't think it's that we don't know. I think we've gotten really good at talking ourselves out of listening. So, what do we actually do with all of this? I don't think the goal is to become someone who's constantly overanalyzing every feeling. Every headache doesn't mean your life is falling apart. Every disagreement doesn't mean you're dating a narcissist. Every bad day doesn't mean you need to quit your job, move to Bali, shave your head, and start selling handcrafted soaps at the farmer's market. Sometimes you're just hungry. Sometimes you just need a nap. Sometimes mercury isn't in Gatorade or whatever they say, making you act the way you've been acting. But I do think we owe it to ourselves to get curious. Not dramatic, curious. Instead of asking, how do I make this feeling go away? Maybe we start asking, what is this feeling trying to tell me? That is a very different question because your body isn't your enemy. Your emotions are not trying to ruin your life. Your anxiety, your frustration, your exhaustion, your resentment, they're usually not the problem. They are the smoke alarm. So here's what I think you do this week. Nothing huge, not asking you to burn your whole life down. Please don't send me an email saying, Caroline, I quit my job because of your podcast. Respectfully, that's between you and your therapist. I'm asking you to notice just one whisper. One. Maybe it's your body. Maybe it's your relationship. Maybe it's your work. Maybe it's the way you've been talking to yourself. And instead of explaining it away, instead of minimizing it, instead of asking TikTok or your best friend, your ex, what is this trying to teach me? Because self awareness is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming honest. And honest people change faster than people who stay busy making excuses. So, if today's episode stepped on your little toes, good. Mine too. And remember, episode made you think of somebody, send it to them. Just do so with caution because you might trigger them. And if you take Come See Me Again, and we will work on our shit together.